Good morning. Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church Online Worship. I'm Reverend David Schwartz, minister here at Beverly Unitarian, and it's a pleasure to be with you this morning in this online service. In this congregation, we welcome all people, every color of the rainbow from every place on earth. Whatever your past was like, whatever your present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Here, we celebrate a wide diversity of beliefs, striving always to make space for more. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we share certain values, 7 principles, which aren't doctrine or dogma, but a guide for us. It's a pleasure this morning to welcome a few other folks into our service. My spouse and co-minister at First Unitarian, Reverend Teri, is going to be joining us. She'll be back a little later in the summer to lead another service. We'll also be joined this morning with music from Rocky Votolato and from the Chicago Children's Choir, as well as our own Renee Jarusek. I'm delighted to have the chance to hear her harp again in this service. In this service, you'll also get to come up the street a little ways to First Unitarian Church, and I'm excited to show you some of the corners and the architecture of that church too, as well as our own. We especially welcome visitors. And I hope that you'll stay for coffee hour, whether this is your first time with us or whether you've been here hundreds and hundreds of times. Use the link that's going to come on screen at the very end of the service if you aren't signed up for the weekly email. And if you aren't signed up for the weekly email, send a note to beverlyunitarian@gmail.com and ask to be included for links and information for all sorts of things that are going on. I so look forward to the day when we'll be together in person again and be able to meet each other face to face. But in the meantime, let's join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship. Here, below the sanctuary at the First Unitarian Church of Chicago, is our church crypt. Here rest the remains of Unitarian dignitaries and ordinary people who lived ordinary lives, often through extraordinary times and with extraordinary faith. They were like us, with hopes and fears and dreams and uncertainties. They were babies and elders, and they're here with us, holding us up. So great a cloud of witnesses. They are our foundations, and we remember them. We remember the past because we believe in a future. The shape of this space, the designs inlaid in its walls, the stones meeting overhead, were all created as reminders of an interior architecture of our spirits, outward symbols of an inner journey. A still, small voice calls to you through the cacophony of the world, and you followed it into this moment. You followed it, a call which you can only answer in the shape of your living. Sometimes our spiritual lives are like this, lighting one small flame in an empty room. Sometimes our work is to sing the joy and to face the cruelty of the world, celebration and solemnity, a laughter and weeping together that comes in the knowing, each of us wounded, each of us blessed. You are the people who tend this flame, a people of hope in a time of uncertainty, a people of unity in a time of isolation, a people that remember the past in order to make a future, a people who tend to their own foundations. May it be so. Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant, the commitment that we make to each other about what it is we're doing here, why we gather, who we're becoming, and who we are. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. I invite you to warmly greet those who have gathered today in the chat, remembering it's public. Say hello. Welcome. I am in the kitchen at Beverly Unitarian without Pilot the dog. I decided the kitchen is probably not a great place for a dog, to talk about breakfast. Do y'all know the phrase, has anyone told you ever breakfast is the most important meal of the day? breakfast is the most important meal of the day. This is the sort of thing that adults like to tell children when they're not eating breakfast. But there's something to it, actually. There's a lot of research that shows that kids who get breakfast consistently, and a decent breakfast, actually have an easier time at school. It's easier to concentrate, it's easier to focus, it's easier to get along with the kids around you. You do better on tests. So breakfast is the most important meal of the day. What does that mean? I have a breakfast option with me here. I have delicious fruit rounds. Now, they are naturally flavored. I'm not totally sure what that means. And they are definitely delicious. And there's nothing wrong with liking and enjoying fruit rounds, which are super tasty. But the thing about fruit rounds is they're also absolutely jam-packed with sugar. So when you have breakfast choices about what you're gonna eat in the morning, these fruit rounds are gonna make you feel great while you're eating them. And for a little while afterwards, you're gonna feel pretty good, but pretty soon, you're gonna get hungry or grumpy or not actually have the energy that you felt like you were having, because it's not the kind of nutrition that makes a foundation for your whole day. It's basically just sugar, and your body runs through sugar pretty quick when it's using energy. So I have another breakfast option for us. I'm gonna show it to you over here. Breakfast option number 2 is a balanced breakfast. We got some quick cooking oats. We'll cook them up in milk in the microwave. Very speedy, very tasty. A little bit of honey to go on top, some bananas to cut up and put in there, some almonds maybe to crush up and put in there. This sort of a breakfast is not going to leave you hungry and grumpy an hour later. It's going to keep you going. It's going to be the most important meal of the day. It's going to be a foundation for a day where you can go and do whatever needs doing. In our church life, in our spiritual life, we have foundations in a similar way. We have things that we attend to that set us up for the whole rest of our days and our weeks and our lives. Things that prepare us to be in the world and be able to pay attention to the world around us, be able to get along with the people around us. Our 7 principles are like foundations for our lives. So we believe in the worth and dignity of every person. That is, we believe that everyone counts, everyone matters. No one is less than anyone else. We believe that people should be treated fairly. This is the milk that you pour over the oats of everyone mattering. We can't just say that people matter. Justice matters. Fairness matters. Acceptance of each other and encouragement to growth in our spiritual lives. There's another piece of our foundation, meaning that people don't just matter if they agree with us. They matter no matter what. And if we disagree, we talk, but we accept each other and we encourage each other to keep growing. None of us are ever totally done. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. There's a little bit of sweetness to go over it. We keep on learning our whole life long. We're never done. We've never arrived at being totally done, perfect people who know everything there is to know. That's part of the foundation for living, is that search, free and responsible for truth and meaning. We think that everyone gets a voice and everyone gets a vote. This is a little bit of a tenuous connection to how that applies to bananas, but that's foundational. It means that at the end of the day, other people shouldn't get to come in and tell you everything that you have to do. I recognize the irony that your parents may tell you you have to eat a complete breakfast. But in the way that we associate and get together, everyone's voice counts and everyone's voice matters. And the use of the democratic process means that we don't all have to agree on everything all the time. Sometimes the majority carries the day. Finally, a respect for an interdependent web, that our community, our lives and our community is not just the people who are around you right now, and not even just the people who gather in this church when we get together in person. Our community is not even just the people in our neighborhood or Chicago. It's not even just people in this country. Our community is a world community, a community of peace and liberty and justice. We're part of a web of relationships that contains all of existence and living. All right, so what does all of that boil down to? What that means is when we go through our lives and our days, these things are the foundations of our days. These are the healthy choices that we make so that we can face the days that we have and do what needs to be done. Thanks for coming along and having breakfast with me this morning. Take care. Friends, will you join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation to breathe deep the breath of life and be here now? Our words for meditation this week are by the poet Dana Folds, called It Is Enough. It is enough right now to taste one moment of peace. Of course, I want more, but at least the door is open. It is enough to draw a conscious breath, to let my hands relax, fingers releasing their tight grasp on things outside my control. It is enough to shed a layer of stress as if taking off a jacket or a pair of too tight shoes. Ease of being has to start somewhere. This breath is my first step. Will you take a breath with me? And another. God, Spirit of life and love, called by many names, known in so many different ways, experienced that love larger than ourselves. Our prayer this morning is to be a people of memory and hope, a people first called home to ourselves, to remember who we are in all our own complexity, to remember and to keep us safe from all the snares and toils and traps of our own self, all those things inside our own head that prevent us from showing up to each other. Our hope, our prayer this morning is to let go of secret shames and private guilts that keep us locked in here instead of looking outward. Our hope and our prayer this morning is to let go of the anger, the resentments that we carry with us, to arrive back into the world again, seeing and meeting each other face to face. Our hope and our prayer is to set ourselves down, to have enough ease of being, to show up for each other, to meet each other as we really are, not our caricatures each of the other, but to meet together as people, face to face, even through a screen. Our hope, our prayer this morning is to get out of our own heads and be together. On this Father's Day, we remember fathers of all kinds, fathers by birth and fathers by choice. We remember the complexities of fatherhood and the difficulties of parenting. We remember those whose relationships were strong and those whose relationships were estranged and those whose relationships were just plain complicated. We say, with love and hope, a word of prayer for all the fathers in the world. Today we remember too Juneteenth. We remember that it took 2.5 years for news of liberation, for the fact of liberation, for the reality of liberation at last, to make it to those enslaved in Texas and become true for them. We're a people of memory and of hope, and we remember then and now that words on a page are no guarantee of freedom. They are hope and aspiration that take work to make real. We're a people of memory and hope. We remember that change is difficult and messy and complicated, and that freedom is coming, peace is coming, not merely the absence of a conflict, but the presence of justice. And on this Sunday, we affirm again that we will be peacemakers, a people committed to bringing justice into the world. Amen. Each week in our community, we light candles. Candles of joy and candles of sorrow, candles of concern and candles of hope. Each of these are a placing of our lives into each other's hands. Each of these are an affirmation that we don't go through this world by ourselves, but in a community of love and care, a community of witness, we acknowledge that our burden is made lighter even when the only change is sharing it with someone. Even when the only change is not trying to go it alone. I invite you in the chat to share your joys or your sorrows, share your hopes, your concerns, share the names of anyone you want to lift up in the love of this community. Or just type I as if you were raising 2 fingers to light a candle in silence.
I don't want this tinsel glory or empty praise that I can't carry. I want no more of this delusion. Just wanna come back home to you again. Please make me your instrument, with eyes inside out, I'll never doubt this. The fruit will always show where the root is planted. Just wanna come back home to you again, 'cause I just wanna be free. I just wanna be free. I just wanna be free.
I'm very lucky to serve at the First Unitarian Church of Chicago with my co-minister and wife, the Reverend Teri Schwartz. And instead of a reading this morning, she's going to offer a practice, a technique called square breathing. So I've got a little bit of work for you all to do. Here she is in the sanctuary of this old Gothic building, giving instruction in square breathing.
I want to teach you a technique called square breathing. This is something I've used in the hospital with patients when I've served as a chaplain and on a detox unit. The beauty of it is it's very simple, and it does work pretty quickly to calm our nervous system, slow our heart rate, and reduce our blood pressure. So I invite you to get a little comfortable with where you're sitting. Feel the points of contact with the chair or the floor. Wherever position, if you can keep your spine straight and something grounded on the floor, that will help. Take a few deep breaths to get started. Calm yourself and put your hands gently in your lap. You can find a point to gaze at, or you might want to close your eyes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you gaze at the rose window if you like, because I know for many people it is an image of beauty among our community and one of contemplation. Now for square breathing, you'll inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and exhale for 4 counts. Wait 4 counts, and then inhale for 4 counts. So on and so forth, like you're tracing the path around a square. Now, everyone's exact counts may vary, your pacing of your counts based on your lung capacity and how you're feeling that day. But to demonstrate, I'll count you off so that we can all take a few breaths together. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Wait. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can adapt this for your own pace depending on where you are at in a given day and your mood and how your body is feeling. Pretty quickly, because we have control the voluntary aspect of our breathing, we can then use that as a tool to impact how our bodies and our minds are functioning. And when we do that, we start to be able to see our world and those around us with greater clarity. It may take time of working on this every day, and it may take time in every session before we really notice a difference. I had a student at one point who was practicing meditation with me, follow her practice for a couple of weeks, and when she met with me for further direction, she said, "Okay, I've been doing it, what next?" And I said, "Well, we just keep doing it." And she said, "But I finished doing it." And I said, "Well, you kind of keep doing it for the rest of our lives. It's like walking or eating nutrition, breathing clean air. These are things that we need in an ongoing way to replenish ourselves. And we often think that our brains will just take care of themselves, but they need care just like every other aspect of us. And when we care for ourselves, that has a really big impact on the world."
When my kids discovered Legos, I rediscovered Legos. Toy that I had loved to play with as a kid. But the other thing that I rediscovered and remembered besides the sets was the fun of just building, of just making. Some people's medium is oils or charcoals, and some people's medium is music, and maybe my medium is small plastic bricks. I rediscovered the instruction that my mom had given me at a young age. She told me, you have to stop following the directions. You have to just start creating on your own. You have to stop following the directions. This is a source of both my great strength and weakness, because sometimes you really do have to follow the directions. Last fall, I started thinking that I would build a scale model of Mont Saint-Michel, the island city castle church off the coast of France, and realized that to do it at minifig scale, it would be 7 feet tall and 25 feet across, so I scaled it back a little bit. But as I started to create this thing over a period of weeks, I began with foundations, with building the foundations onto which something could be put. This time, I didn't want to just build a church. I wanted to build a church and put it on the top of a hill. And to do that took cathedral thinking. Cathedral thinking is long-term thinking. When medieval cathedrals were built, they were a project that took generations to build. So cathedral thinking meant that I might work my whole life just to set a foundation, just to raise one pillar. And that would be all of my contribution, but it was going towards something bigger, that the point is not just to put in a foundation or just to raise one pillar, but to be part of something that endures, part of something that we could imagine, this end result that we could see in our heart, in our imagination, even if it wasn't going to happen in our own lifetime. That sort of cathedral thinking doesn't have to extend across generations. Cathedral thinking means we pay attention to the things that we can do right now, to the things that we can do today that make the future possible, that make something else possible in the days and the years to come. But you also do this in your spiritual life, tending to the foundations that day by day don't transform you radically, but over time prepare the way for the kind of person that you're becoming. I say sometimes here that you're beloved both as you are and as you can become. I say sometimes we love you exactly like you are, and you could use a little bit of work. We could all use a little bit of work. We say, come into this house and be both the person that you are right now and grow into that person that you're becoming as you follow the call of your own life. Cathedral thinking means tending to the foundations of your spiritual path. It means paying attention to those things on top of which your life is built. Sometimes we get really obsessed with the end result, right? Instagram reality that is so focused and obsessed with how do things look on their surfaces. The way that we curate our Facebook profiles. So much of this stuff is surfaces. We're people who are concerned with the foundations that lie behind those surfaces. I think often Von Ogden Vogt, the minister of this church many years ago, the one who built this Gothic sanctuary, said that calm repose and a steadfast endurance of the Spirit is induced by a clean wall of stone well laid. I think about that when I think of us being foundations people. People who tend not just to the surfaces of things, but to the order, to the solidity. People in our own lives trying to create a spiritual path, a person that is as solidly grounded as these stone walls are. People who tend to foundations. In our spiritual life, we're constantly building and rebuilding. Constantly, over and over, tending to our foundations, realizing that something isn't strong enough and going back and adding additional cross-bracing to make it toughen up, to stand up to the living. In Legos, a piece can fall off. You just put it back on again. That same thing is true in our own lives. You lose the thread, you lose your temper, you lose your gratitude, you lose any sense of awe, wonder, or hope for the world. That's okay. The piece fell off. You just pick it up and you put the thing back on again. And it's going to fall off again. Legos aren't permanent. This was the entire plot of the first Lego movie, is how awful it is to glue your Legos together. Don't do that. The things come apart and they come back together again. This is the lives that we live. What are for you those foundations that your spiritual life rests on? What are the foundations strong enough to hold up a life that is spacious and beautiful? A life of service and integrity, a life of joy, a life of beauty. There are practices that let us tend to the foundations. Reverend Teri talked about square breathing, that way of recentering and resettling yourself down again. For me, practices like that are a way of remembering what really matters. They're a way of letting go of the surface world of things and recentering, regrounding, saying, all right, where are my foundations today? What kind of shape are they in? Are there any cracks here that need tending to? Are there any pieces that have fallen off in the last few days? I can put them back on again. I can keep on going. Tending to your spiritual foundation, just like tending to the maintenance in this building, or reattaching the pieces that fall off, rebuilding the parts of the structure that aren't solid, tending to your spiritual foundations is a practice which we continually lose and have to rediscover and attach the pieces back together again. That foundation lets you weather the storm. Here in our own church home, we know, and maybe better than most, that a structure which looks absolutely rock solid still needs care and attention paid to it. We know better than most that deferred maintenance, that small changes in the little gaps between the stones adds up over time, and the whole thing can come tumbling down unless you take it apart and you put it back together again. That same thing is true in our spiritual lives. We practice week after week and day after day, sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small ways, sometimes just by breathing steadily and regrounding ourselves. We practice tending to our foundations. Every time you pause for square breathing, every time you pause in prayer, every time you say a word of gratitude to end your day before bed, every time you sing, that's tending to the mortar, that's paying attention, that is tuck pointing the spirit so that we don't come tumbling down. Sometimes for folks who didn't grow up in any religious tradition, or for folks who did but just didn't connect with it, didn't get anything out of it, I try to explain that worship is work. And worship during the service is actually much less my work than it is your work. And that's true when we gather together physically, but that's equally true when we gather by screen. If you join in singing, that's practice. If you light a candle, that's practice. In the moments of prayer, that's work that you're doing. I really feel like all I'm doing here is offering an invitation. But the reality of the service, this is not my service. This is ours together. This is something that you make through the engagement with it. And it's sort of a strange thing to try and explain, that what we're doing during the service is regrounding and reconnecting, that we're seeking out a feeling, a state of being, a way of being as individuals and together, taking out the bad mortar between the stones of our spirit and putting that thing back together again, stronger and better. One of the reasons that these stones had to come down was the mortar didn't let them breathe. Water needs to move inside and outside of these stones, relative humidity of Joliet limestone on the inside and the outside. And that's true in our own spirits too. We need space to breathe. We need to breathe. We know that these last few weeks better than any. We need to breathe to put our voices to work for justice in the world. We need to breathe when we face the reality of grief and loss. We need to breathe when we have been cooped up inside for months. Our spirits need to breathe, to be out of our own head and our own gripes and complaints and back into the space of meeting each other, people to people, back in the space of the holy. That's what we're doing week after week when we practice. Even when we say hello in the chat box of friendship, that is practice. That's tending to our foundations. I am a person, and I will confess this honestly, who prefers one single short, heroic effort to a steady, sustained effort week after week after week. I am the person who would rather just tear the whole thing down and rebuild it than tuck point it every single year. But you can't make a life that way. You can't stay grounded as a person by making the occasional heroic effort every so often. And when things are difficult, when the moment of crisis comes, tending to our foundations is what lets us be prepared for that. It's what lets us say yes when the call comes in the middle of the night of someone in trouble or in pain. It's what gets us out of our own head and our own needs and helps us serve each other. It's what helps us notice how absolutely gorgeous this world is, even at the same time that it's going all wrong. Tending our foundations is making a life together. It's holy work. And as this year comes to a close, this strange church year, this dumpster fire of 2020, and this glorious and incredible work that you are doing on your home here, as this all comes to a close and we head to our summer services, a pause and end a moment in gratitude. I'm grateful for the opportunity to practice with you, tending collectively to the health, to the solidness of our foundations, so we can make a future together. We all live here, and it's a pleasure to be on this road with you. Amen, and go in peace.